It's a gut punch to a nation already on its knees. Amidst a pandemic and the heavy toll it's inflicted, the death of a black man at police hands that has spurred a nation into protest, and unemployment data that hangs as an overarching dark cloud.
There's no doubt that the economy is really going to suffer, not just in the short term, but with the amount of fiscal stimulus and borrowing that the government has had to undertake to stabilize the situation. This overhang of debt is going to last for many decades to come.
While layoffs remained high, they eased off in the month of May as businesses and economies around the country began phased reopenings following wholesale shutdowns in March over a raging pandemic.
Avoidable household and business insolvencies can weigh on growth for years to come. Long stretches of unemployment can damage or end workers' careers as their skills lose value and professional networks dry up, and leave families in greater debt. The loss of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses across the country would destroy the life's work and family legacy of many businesses and community leaders, and limit the strength of the recovery when it comes. These businesses are a principal source of job creation, something we will need sorely as people seek to return to work.
And while there's a growing view among economists that the country had likely hit the bottom for unemployment, recovery will be slow, while black people continue to bear the brunt from COVID-19, its economic fallout, and police brutality.
George Floyd's story has been the story of black folks, because ever since 401 years ago, the reason we could never be who we wanted and dreamed to be in is you kept your knee on our neck. We were smarter than the underfunded schools you put us in, but you had your knee on our neck. We could run corporations and not hustle in the street, but you had your knee on our neck. We had creative skills. We could do whatever anybody else could do. But we couldn't get your knee off our neck. What happened to Floyd happens every day in this country, in education, in health services, and in every area of American life. It's time for us to stand up in George's name and say, get your knee off our necks.
A historically disadvantaged group where safety nets tend to be more fragile to begin with. African American unemployment in the United States is at least 2 percentage points higher than the official rate nationwide. In a recent report, the Economic Policy Institute, a nonpartisan think tank based in Washington, says this is a demographic that historically suffers from higher unemployment, in addition to lower wages, lower income, a lower rate of savings to fall back on, and is significantly affected by higher poverty rates than their white counterparts. Sherwin, Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
So Sherwin, Bryce-Pease, U.S. correspondent, filing that report. He joins us now live. A very good evening to you, Sherwin. Thanks for your time. So while economists had predicted unemployment to tick up to close to 20%, the job numbers showed an improvement in employment from 14.7 to 13.3%. How are these surprising numbers being digested?
Yeah, a smidgen of good news, Griselda, with a great deal of gratitude, I imagine, for a lot of people. You saw the President of the United States soon after those numbers came out at 8:30 a.m. local time, tweeting immediately that there would be a press conference. And really, this is some good news in a sea of negativity. Of course, as you correctly point out, economists had predicted their forecasts had placed this number after the Labor Department report today at over 19%, possibly breaching 20%. And of course, these are figures you haven't seen since the Great Depression in in the 1930s. And of course, President Trump speaking, really giving his administration a great deal of credit. You'll remember that this was a red-hot economy in January before coronavirus struck. Unemployment was around 3.5%, a 50-year low, Criselda. So clearly a lot of credit goes to the administration of President Donald Trump, who came out to talk about these numbers and drawing a rather tenuous link between what you are seeing on the streets of the United States, Criselda, in terms of people seeking equal justice under the law and a burgeoning economy. Let's watch what he had to say.
Equal justice under the law must mean that every American receives equal treatment in every encounter with law enforcement, regardless of race, color, gender, or creed. They have to receive fair treatment from law enforcement. They have to receive it. We all saw what happened last week. We can't let that happen. Hopefully George is looking down right now and saying, there's a great thing that's happening for our country. There's a great day for him. It's a great day for everybody. This is a great day for everybody. This is a great, great day in terms of equality. It's really what our Constitution requires, and it's what our country is all about.
Those comments about George Floyd are clearly raising some eyebrows. I'll just give you some analysis of the 13.3% unemployment figure, Criselda. 16.8% unemployment for the black demographic in this country. Black unemployment, despite the national number going down, has gone up. 16.8% is their number. The Hispanic demographic at 17.6%. That is the hardest hit demographic in the United States. Asians at 15%. The white population, that's where you saw the big improvement. White unemployment in this country at 12.4%, the lowest of all those demographics, Criselda.
Now, Sherwin, amidst protests in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd at the hands of police, the COVID-19 pandemic is still taking a heavy toll on the United States. Paint a picture for us.
Well, COVID has moved from the front pages and the top stories on the television networks here, given the protests you've seen, legitimately so, on the streets of the United States that have really proliferated cities across this nation. But a lot of people are not seeing the numbers, in terms of headlines. COVID-19 is still a pandemic that is raging around the world, particularly here in the United States. Over 1,000 deaths in the last 24 hours. And it's been over 1,000 deaths daily in the United States for a number of days still. 20,000 new infections plus every day. So the big concern here, as you see these protests, you saw the memorial services in New York and in Minneapolis, people closely packed in together. Yes, some wearing masks, a lot not wearing masks. The tussles that you've seen on the streets of New York and other places where you get into very close proximity with others. The big concern here moving forward, Criselda, is what does a second wave look like, even though we haven't completely moved past the first wave. So there's a great deal of concern here about what the after effects of these protests will be and what the numbers will reflect in that regard.
Sherwin, this is a big one. I mean, as the economies continue to open up, a big day coming on Monday when New York City begins a phased reopening. For a very long time, the epicenter of the pandemic, of course, in the United States. How is that news being received?
Yeah, with a great deal of caution. You'll know that parts of this country have reopened a long time ago. That parts of rural New York State, the extended areas beyond New York City's borders, New York City's borders have already opened. So this is going to be the phase one reopening of essentially one of the most populous cities in the most populous city in the United States, the third largest economy in terms of states after California and Texas. So a great deal of trepidation. When people commute here, you don't just get into your car and drive to work. You have to use public transport, and that means getting on subway cars and using trains and getting on buses and sharing those spaces with other people. So a great deal of concern of how this phased approach will play out. Of course, a great deal of anticipation. We've been locked down for over 3 months. But if you look at big corporations, New York City, Griselda, is the headquarters of big companies around the world, including the headquarters of the United Nations. And they, for example, have told staff that you are not allowed to come back to headquarters until the earliest June 30th. And that isn't even a certainty. So we're seeing a phased approach here. There's also going to be a new normal moving forward. A lot of companies telling their staff, we will not need a 100% capacity back in the office post this coronavirus pandemic. So a lot of a new dimension, a lot of new paradigms that will come to the fore in terms of how we work in the future.
Yeah, sure. And finally, a street near the now heavily fortified White House being renamed Black Lives Matter Plaza by the Democratic mayor of Washington. Do tell.
Yeah, a bit of a finger in the face or the eye of President Donald Trump, literally a few steps away from the White House, essentially where you saw those peaceful protests on Monday being so violently dispersed after the president spoke in the Rose Garden and walked over to the nearby church for that photo op. Of course, it's now been renamed Black Lives Matter Plaza, an initiative by the mayor of Washington, D.C. and the city council, Mayor Muriel E. Bowser. She said the following, and I quote her, "As Washingtonians, we simply all want to be here together in peace to demonstrate that in America you can peacefully assemble, you can bring grievances to your government, and you can demand change." And as you well know, a lot of people refer to the United States as that shining city on a hill. The First Amendment protects peaceful protests. It's fundamental to the U.S. Constitution. And I think those pictures of peaceful protesters being violently removed from that area to allow the president to walk over to the church has really been an affront to many. And you've heard a lot of people speak out since then against this president, Griselda.
Sherwin, thanks as always for your time. Do keep safe. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News US correspondent to us live there from New York. Thanks indeed for your time.